Police fire tear at protesters in Hong Kong ahead of general strike. Live video. Hong Kong, thousands of anti-government demonstrators in Hong Kong kicked off the second of 3 straight days of large-scale civil disobedience on Sunday, as riot police again fired tear gas to disperse protest crowds. The demonstrations on Sunday came a day after, resulting in more than 20 arrests, and a day before a planned citywide strike that may significantly disrupt daily life in Hong Kong, a semi-autonomous Chinese territory. They are a further together, the long weekend of civil unrest may place a new level of pressure on the government to meet the protest movement's broad range of demands. They include Samson Yuan, an assistant professor at Lingnan University who studies local social movements, said the weekend protests were intended to enervate the police ahead of the general strike on Monday. Protests have been happening in multiple districts at the same time rather than one concentrated area, which is rather unprecedented, Mr. Yuan said. As protests, the strike and other events in the largely leaderless protest movement have been organized informally through social messaging apps like Telegram. Mr. Yuan said, if a general strike does happen tomorrow, it means it can happen again, Mr. Yuan said. Among the objects hurled at police officers on Saturday were at least 2 gasoline bombs, the local news media said, indicating a possible escalation in the violence that has often flared at the end of recent protests after most demonstrators have gone home. The mostly peaceful protests this summer, which began nearly 2 months ago, have thrown Hong Kong into its worst political crisis since Britain handed control to China in 1997. The Hong Kong government last week, the commander of the warned that violent protests that challenged China's political system were absolutely intolerable. But the prospect of a Chinese military intervention in Hong Kong still appears remote, even as the embattled Hong Kong police struggle to maintain public order. Protesters began marching on Sunday afternoon in Tseung Kwan O, a quiet residential district in eastern Hong Kong that lies across the harbour from the city's main island. The event was approved. Amid drizzling rain, a crowd of protesters of all ages wove through the streets as curious residents opened their high-rise windows to watch. Monday, we strike. The protesters chanted. Li Liping, 67, who lives in Tseung Kwan O and attended the march, said it was only the second time this summer that she had come out to protest. She said I was watching it on my son's computer, and I felt so angry I wanted to cry, Ms. Li said. I have grandchildren already, and they are still very young, she added. I don't want them to. The police presence in Tseung Kwan O was like for the first few hours of the protest. Riot police protesters threw eggs at the Tseung Kwan O police station. Minutes after, by early evening, thousands of demonstrators, including families, had gathered in a park on the main island's western fringes for a police-authorized rally. Many of them planned. Thousands of protesters are now marching on the roads towards Sheungwan, chanting Monday, strike. And recover Hong Kong, revolution of our times. Maggie Chung, a 32-year-old accountant who was among the demonstrators in the park, said she intended to participate in the strike on Monday even though she had not yet passed the probationary period of her new job. If I lose my job, I can find another one, she said. But if Hong Kong is shortly after 7 p.m., the Hong Kong police accused the marchers of participating in an unauthorized assembly, and riot police on the ground began to fire tear gas. The route of the unauthorized march was set to pass by the Chinese Government Liaison Office, a building that protesters defaced 2 weeks ago with eggs and graffiti. As of early Sunday, the protest movement began because of opposition to the contentious extradition bill, which has since by the territory's unpopular leader, Carrie Lamentations. But she has refused. The protesters are also seeking Mrs. Lam's resignation, direct elections, the retraction of the government's characterization of it as a riot and the unconditional release of all protesters who have been arrested since early June. But it is highly unlikely. The protesters and their supporters are particularly angry about the slow response by the police on July 21, when protesters, journalists and bystanders were. And they view a police. After a night of tense standoffs on Saturday between protesters and riot police officers in dense urban areas, the police on suspicion of a range of offenses, including assault and unlawful assembly. The conflict began late Saturday afternoon, after thousands of protesters veered off an approved protest route in Kowloon, a broad and densely populated peninsula across from the main island, and occupied a major shopping district for hours. Some of them, at one point on Saturday afternoon, some protesters removed a Chinese flag from a pole and tossed it into the harbor, drawing outrage from some people in Hong Kong, including Liu Chunying, Mrs. Lam's predecessor. In a statement on Sunday, the mainland government agency responsible for Hong Kong affairs said that action must be severely punished in accordance with the law, and not softly. The ugly acts of a very small number of extremist radicals insulting the national flag have once again shown that their actions and behaviors have gone far beyond the scope of free expression and slipped into the abyss of crime, the statement said. Follow Mike Ives on Twitter. Tiffany May, Catherine Lee, and Ezra Chung contributed reporting from Hong Kong, and Claire Fu contributed research from Beijing.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.